And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And we are joined today by a special guest co-host.
Hello, everyone. I am Lauren Sick. You may know me as Dear Dova Queen.
And?
What's Dear Dova Queen?
Well, I'm glad you asked. That is my bi-weekly advice column that I run for the No Direction Network. People write in questions and they ask, hey, Dear Dova Queen, how do I get my players to zig when I need them to zag? And I do my best to help them keep their game straight.
How do I get my players to zig when I need them to zag? Why would I want them to zig if I need them to zag?
Oh, well, I guess that's a good point. See? And that's all explained in the column.
Is the answer a cattle prod?
It can be. Sometimes in-game, sometimes in real life.
We'll talk more about the Dear Dova Queen towards the end of the episode. You'll get plenty of time to plug your column and let people know how they can get in touch with you if they have a question. Mm-hmm. But today we've got a special, it's a news and banter-focused episode, so that's fun. That's something we don't do often enough, but we've got a big chunk of Pathfinder news and excitement out with the Kingmaker game by Owlcat Games. Also, let's have fun seeing how many times I accidentally call Owlcat Owl City, the band from the early 2000s.
I love Owl City, but I always call them Owl Bear games.
Yeah, all right. So there we go. I call them Owl City. You call them Owl Bear.
Mm-hmm. From now on, I'll call them Bugbear games, and we'll have our bases covered.
Perfect. Except, as much as possible, call them Owlcat Games. It is the name of the company. It's only the polite thing to do. We are going to get into Kingmaker. We're going to talk at length about our experiences with it. We should point out this is not a review. This is a discussion. This is just kind of fanning over a game that we're all enjoying. Mm-hmm. I guess spoilers for when that conversation starts. It's going to be pretty positive. But there are some important pieces of news that we haven't had a chance to talk about in the last couple of episodes. So before we get to Kingmaker, we are going to cover some of those important news points, starting with the Archives of Nethys. Archives of Nethys is a fan site that's been run by Blake Davis for several years now. In fact, Blake won the Pathfinder the Paizo Volunteer of the Year award for it a couple of years ago. And it's been an incredible resource with a really fun atmosphere to the whole website. Recently, Paizo announced that Blake Davis and the Archives of Nethys will be maintaining the Pathfinder and Starfinder reference documents. So the PRD and the SRD, or that's what the Starfinder reference is called, right? SRD, not SFRs?
Well, funny thing, that's what it was once proposed to be called. They have never successfully launched that document in the entire year that Starfinder's been in operation.
And that is one of the reasons that they went outside to a licensee, a licensor. They're the licensees. I think I'm getting that right. Yes.
Archives of Nethys is licensing from Paizo.
There we go. So they went to a second party to handle it because of the open gaming license and the PRD. People are allowed to do that anyway. That's how Archives of Nethys and the D20 PFSRD both exist to begin with.
Right. There was a very important distinction between the two, however. The Archive of Nethys was operating under the Pathfinder, not the compatibility, the Community Use License, which is a version of the license for Pathfinder that allowed for much more liberal use of their intellectual property. You were allowed to actually name their cities, characters, gods, basically any of the things that they normally protect from this traditional Pathfinder. Gosh, these so many different licenses, but from the usual Pathfinder compatibility license. And in order to be using community use license, you have to be a complete not a non-profit, but you can't charge for the thing that you are offering. It has to be completely free of charge. It's meant for fan works. That's what the Wayfinder famously operates on. And at one point in time, so did D20 PFSRD was also using the same license. But when D20 PFSRD started making a store connected with their site, they were no longer allowed to use that license, and now they use the Pathfinder compatibility license and the OGL, whereas Archive of Nethys, all the way up until today, was using the community use license, which meant that they could basically only ask for donations. They couldn't, that was the advertisement is allowed, and donation is allowed as a fundraising method, but nothing else.
And he was really using that community use license right down to naming his website a Paizo-owned name.
Mm-hmm. It would be very hard to convert that website over.
Yeah. So, like you said, that Starfinder did not have an SRD out there, not an official one from Paizo. And basically, Paizo was saying that this is a burden that we cannot bear right now. There are other people that are already doing it in the community that are doing a better job than we could be doing. And so they came up with a license agreement. Now, there's been some controversy about whether Blake should be treated like an employee and paid for his service. But the flip side being that he's a licensee. Yes. Why am I getting these mixed up so often? He is licensing Paizo to be the official Pathfinder and Starfinder reference documents. Mm-hmm. And so an argument could be made that he should be paying for that privilege. Just like the Talking Dead is the official Walking Dead after show. Like, that's something that show only exists and gets traffic based on it being officially recognized. Mm-hmm. So that's the position Archives of Nethys is in right now. No money is being exchanged. We don't know the details of the agreement, only that both parties are very happy with the agreement that they came to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is I think the important thing is, first, it's a private business arrangement between parties is usually none of our business to begin with. But both parties have, well, not both parties, but the Archives of Nethys side of things, they have come out and said that they are very, quote unquote, very happy with the arrangement as it exists. So, that's, if they're happy, that's their business.
Lauren, how do you feel about the Archives of Nethys?
I'm just glad that it's working well for both sides. When you have a website like this is really useful for helping bring new players into Pathfinder. Maybe people who've played other systems, they come to the game and they're like, man, I'd really love to run a Ranger, but I don't know where I can read about them. You can so easily just link them the Ranger from Archives of Nethys and just get that material to them very quickly without them having to buy 6 different source books right at the beginning.
Yeah, that was always the intention of the PRD, or the whatever the 3.5 version of it was. The D20 SRD?
That was the D20SRD.org website was that version of it before the PRD. And there was the SRD, the System Reference Document. That was an actual document. Now, they did host it online, but you could download it as a series of Word files from Wizards of the Coast. And that was a official document and a legal document, because technically when you're publishing OGL stuff under the D20 license, you had to use the SRD as the base, and a lot of the for the D20 license specifically, not the OGL, worded a lot of it on the SRD's interpretation of the rules and requirements, and limits the scope of what you could use based off that very specific document file for 3.0 D&D.
So yeah, the original intent was that not owning the books should not be a barrier for someone to play the game, and that people who own the books should not be limited to only play with other people that own the books. And the Hypertext D20 PFSRD that we were talking about, I think took it in a direction that Wizards of the Coast was not expecting. Right. Maybe they were. But it changed the game. It revolutionized the game as far as I'm concerned, at least how people play. Mm-hmm. And so when Paizo started publishing Pathfinder, it became part of their marketing, their brand. And I remember Eric Mona even giving, I believe, at the Gamma Trade Show one year, a speech talking about how people argued, well, this is then valuing your rules at $0, and anyone paying more than $0 is going to perceive themselves as paying more than the value of your product. And that's like, one, underestimating the physical book and the production quality and the art and layout. And he's like, he listed a whole bunch of reasons why you could still be perfectly profitable while also giving away what could be seen as the main product that you are selling.
Mm-hmm. And in all fairness, it's been a really good decision. It's those documents that brought me into Pathfinder from 3.5 and 5th edition in the first place. If it wasn't for those, I'd still probably be rolling with advantage on attacks.
I also remember the 3.5 days where I would bring a milk crate of all my books to wherever I was playing. And at one point, once internet connections became a little more popular and it was easier to access the website than it was to carry things around, that made the game much more portable.
Right. And it was part of the marketing to the point that at the beginning of every single core rulebook line, the RPG line, the hardback line, there's a little blurb at it that says these rules are available at this address on the Paizo website for the PRD. And also, it's notable that for the last few years, that has been an empty promise because the website itself was very behind, several books behind the publishing. And like we said, Starfinder launched over a year ago, and they had not gotten their SRD even up during that time period. So at the beginning of every single Starfinder core rulebook, it was saying, hey, go here for the free rules, and then you couldn't. That address just goes nowhere. It goes to a coming soon page.
Which is just fascinating, because like one of the hurdles for playtesting the second edition material is that I don't have the online resources that I'm used to, and I just accept that because that's part of the playtest. But the idea that I don't have those same resources, or at least not the official ones, because Archives of Nethys did have the Starchives of Nethys, but like I didn't have the first-party resources that I am now grown used to. That this is just part of how I play. And it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and also, to be fair, Archive of Nethys isn't exactly up to date either. They have been fairly far behind in publishing recently too, but that's been forgivable because this is a one or two. I think it really is just a one-man show for the entirety of the archive and maintaining it. And I can tell you from experience, maintaining similar products is exhausting and time-consuming, especially when you do not have a business model for it. And it is completely free. Eventually, your goodwill and fandom is a resource that dries up. And
then you consider the amount of content in Pathfinder. I don't know.
Lord.
I honestly don't even understand how he gets it all done.
Well, to be fair, he hasn't. He's been right now. There is still a backlog of material, even though they've gone official. There is, let's see, he doesn't have anything past Adventure Path 120. He doesn't have Bestiary 5 or Bestiary 6. That's a 2-year gap of Bestiaries, as well as soft covers and all kinds of other ones. The Universal Monster Rule page, Errata, and most of the changes to the Advanced Race Guide aren't even built into there. In Starfinder, he's more up to date. He has all the core rules in, and he's just behind on a few of the Adventure Path volumes, which is fair because he says that he's only missing 7, and 8 just came out, so not very far behind on the Starfinder front, at least.
Now, I should give some shout out to the D20 PFSRD because they are up to date and they have an incredible just database of material. The disadvantage they have to the Archives of Nethys is that when there is intellectual property baked into the rules, they have to then reverse engineer the recipe. And then as a user of it, if I'm looking up a specific feat that I know is from a specific campaign setting book that has campaign setting flavor, I've got to figure out what they might have translated it to. And there's a basic formula of how they might do it, but it's still, you got to look for keywords and memorize specific things from a description of a spell or an option or whatever that has been renamed for copyright reasons.
And for the last couple of books, though, Paizo's been playing friendly with the third parties on that, where they have in the back of the book started putting the official third party or IP free name of the class, fee, etc. There's a little table at the back of the books lately that just says this thing that you can't use because of intellectual property, just call it this instead. And now that has been helpful because that will extend to all third parties, so that just because D20 says it's one thing and then say this is unofficial, but like maybe Rogue Genius calls it something else and Legendary Game calls it something else, then it becomes very confusing where you could technically take the same feat 3 times and not know that it was originally the same original feat.
I never thought of that.
And we just have such a vibrant third-party community in Pathfinder that's really just a boon for the entire game.
Yeah, I hope they keep that up, especially going into PF2 and Starfinder. In Starfinder, it's actually a big deal. Sorry to interrupt you there. But in Starfinder, one of the core rules of the game is intellectual property named but for an intellectual property, and that has made some little bit of a bumpy ride for third-party publishers, where the concept of hyperspace travel goes through the drift, but even the phrase the drift and drift engines and drift drives, and this thing that is baked hardcore into the very foundation of the rule system is an IP name that has to be renamed for all the third-party stuff over there, and that has been a bumpy ride and caused confusion.
I do want to talk about what chat is saying, because chat's already being pretty active. So
Yo.
First of all, Param, how could people get in touch with us during a live episode?
Well, we are doing this episode, like all episodes, live in front of a Twitch audience. You can join us during the episodes, which are usually Wednesdays at 9 o'clock Eastern, new time. Do keep in mind, we are now broadcasting half an hour later as a regular basis. And you can do so at twitch.tv/no direction. Join in the chat, get your questions in and comments in there, and we will introduce them throughout the show.
So first I'm going to address Nice Piano Man. He had a question even before we went live. Well, actually, just as we were going live, asking where our opening music is from. So, Nice Piano Man, we've had this theme song for almost 10 years now, so I cannot tell you exactly where I got it. It was either from podcastthemes.com or freeplaymusic.com. It was called Last Song Home. I've looked for it since, and it just seems to be either discontinued or maybe it's been renamed. But as far as I know, we are the only podcast that actually used that as a theme song. I think it's great. I think it's right on the field we're trying to get. 3.5 Private Sanctuary had some original themes, but I believe the original one that a lot of those other themes were based on. Oh no, Jay made that one. I was going to say that was something we also got from podcast themes, but no, that one was an original, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Then we've got Signs Point to Fail, says Lauren. Brittany says hi.
Hello, Brittany and Signs.
So Brittany and Signs are two different people? I couldn't quite tell from how they were saying that.
Yes, I know those clowns. That's two different people.
Ha 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 ha.
Dungeon Novice says they are a huge fan of the Archives of Nethys because it's not blocked on their work computers.
That's advantageous. Yeah. But you mentioned that the D20, getting back on topic, you mentioned that the D20 PFSRD was kept up to date, and a lot of the reason that, and that goes to say a lot to what we were just talking about, because I imagine a lot of the reasons that they are constantly up to date, day and date with their updates is because they are a for-profit business. One of the they've turned their website into one of the major sources for online role-playing game stores, especially Starfinder and Pathfinder related, though they do also publish materials for other systems, and they are an online physical store now too. And because of that, I imagine is how they have the resources to have multiple people dedicated to posting constant updates on that website.
I believe it is a combination of staff and volunteers, but there is definitely, they are on the ball. There is a grace period, I believe, of 3 weeks between when a product comes out and when they put it on the PFSRD, and they do that as a favor to Paizo, and because it was like unofficially requested that it's like, at least give us a few weeks to sell the book before you put it online. And if they didn't give them this grace period, I think they could get it up much sooner than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do not know how they do it. I do know that in some cases there is some machine reading that like actually feed the PDF file into something that breaks it apart. Because PDF files have a lot of HTML-like coding built into their structure, and you can pull that open and just really dig in. It's fun. But beyond that, that is a completely voluntary thing, and they are always that third week hits, and then boom, everything's up. They've
got a really good relationship with third-party publishers, and anytime, let's say, you go to the page for a certain class, if a third-party publisher has a book dedicated to that class, then there is an ad space that will populate stuff related specifically to that, and it's very well structured ad space population. Also, because they cannot use Paizo art anymore, they have a great arrangement with third-party publishers where they can use some of the art that they've commissioned for their books, giving credit and therefore advertising and linking to the product that the art is from. It's a tightly wound machine and a really cleverly run community.
And as I understand it from my talks with several third-party publishers, they pay the highest percentage of all the possible bookstores out there.
I believe that's correct. I think it's like 8% more, but it's notable. They are the ones that are most generous with their payouts. Now, I do want to address a question from chat. GameSage55 asks if 2.0 has flopped at this point. So we are going to transition into some news about the Pathfinder playtest. But what an interesting question, given that 2.0 is not out yet. It is a product that is in development and will be released in August. I know that some people definitely have just been calling the playtest 2.0, and I have been very conscious to make sure that I call it the playtest rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have liked a little expression-friendlier title for it, since there have been Pathfinder playtests before.
No, if we could just call this beta like we did the other versions of everything. It's always been betas. We could just call this the Pathfinder 2 beta. And then
that would be Pathfinder 2 Alpha, and then the updates are creating a beta on the fly.
No. Alpha means it's feature incomplete. Beta means that the features are there but may change.
Okay.
So the fact that it is
a playtest.
Yes. It's the 2.0 playtest.
Mm-hmm.
So there has been a recent update. There was a major one a couple of weeks ago, which we talked about with Stephen on the episode from 2 weeks back. Update 1.4 is the most recent update, and it is Ancestry specific. And in the meantime, in those 2 weeks, there have also been an influx of surveys.
Yeah, some really big surveys. So we got the usual, this is the playtest survey for the recent version of the playtest Doomsday Dawn adventure that we've been used to. But then Jason Bowman put out on socials and then on the blog this ginormous, like multi-hour long survey that is just like a lot more open-ended and was like literally, tell us what you think of this, what do you think of this, what do you think of this, how easy was this, just talking about every aspect of the game almost.
And it does come with a warning that it takes about an hour to fill out. And you and I both filled it out, Param, and I think that hour is about right.
That hour is a conservative estimate.
And as we discussed, you cannot fill out part of it and save it and come back. This is a dedicated chunk of your time. I mean, I guess you could have it open in another tab and go back and forth, but you can't I'm done for the day, I will get back to this tomorrow, unless you leave your computer on the whole time.
And that doesn't always work, because some websites, depending on how they have it set up, will eventually time out that connection if you leave a page open and not interact with it for a long enough period of time. So conceivably, you could lose all that. I don't know how SurveyMonkey works on that level, but I do know other websites that works, that if you, longer than 20 minutes, then just poof, it's all gone. One
thing that may get overlooked, it says at this top, if you do not have an opinion or an answer, you can just leave it blank, which is good, because at the beginning, a lot of the questions are, were you playing this? Were you GMing this? What was your experience with it? And my only experience with 2.0 has been as a GM. And there are very obviously player-centric questions. And so any answer I have would just be theory. And some questions have a N/A column, and some of them don't. And N/A or leaving it blank is the same result. You are passing on that question.
I won't lie, you guys. The size of these surveys and the inability to save and come back have really got me scared of doing them. I've just been letting you all handle them because I trust your opinion.
And that is a problem, because that is called a self-selecting bias. And I really worry that the way that they've been handling the surveys and feedback collection is going to be biasing the results, because you have to be super passionate to sit through an hour-long survey about a playtest of a game that's not even out yet.
Now, is it possible that the groups that are most likely to be that passionate are the ones passionately for and passionately against?
Yeah.
And they will hopefully meet somewhere in the middle?
But it gives us but when you want to do surveys, you want a broad range of people to, you want as many possible people to fill it out and complete the surveys, so that you have as unbiased results as you can possibly get. You don't want just the people that hate it and just the people that love it to do it, because that's going to skew the data, and you're not going to get a really good, clear picture of how the market as a whole is going to receive your product.
Also skewing the data is how some of the questions are worded. I know there are several questions that are just, is X option powerful? And I'm like, does that mean powerful enough or too powerful? If I say, no, it's not powerful, is that going to get changed? Or if I say, yes, it's powerful, it's going to change that option?
And I don't know. And what is powerful? That's a really weird question. Is it...
Are options supposed to be powerful? and therefore saying it's powerful means it is meeting my expectations.
Well,
Right.
I think what they're looking for there is you're not casting a spell expecting some cool thing to happen, and then it just feels like you've lightly caressed the orc boss's face. They want to know that it has power in it, you know?
Right.
But the operative word in that sentence is you think, because we don't know.
We
And
don't.
There's so much feedback and questions already going around that, yes, we could stop the survey and say, hey, can somebody clear up what you mean by powerful? But with the risk of timing out that I hadn't even considered, you might not get an answer until it's too late.
Right. Yeah. But
There's also one question that was like, here's a specific 5th edition mechanic that we are naming but not explaining. Should we be more like that? And it's like, you have not given me any context for this question. So you and I talked through Param, and you explained
I had to
what they're
explain.
actually asking.
Yeah, they were talking about the concept of bounded accuracy, which is a meta concept about the 5th edition D&D that you might not even know what is unless you are tracking the development side of 5th edition D&D or doing third-party production for it. And you need to know what that is, because the phrase bounded accuracy means nothing to the rules. You do not need to
So
know
even if
what
I had
that
a core
phrase is to
rulebook for
play the
5th
game.
edition, even if I had a core rulebook, I couldn't open the spine and find what they're talking about.
I don't know if the concept's explained in the player's handbook or not, but I do know that you don't need to know what that phrase is to play the game. And most people learn role-playing games by being taught how to play role-playing games.
I am glad I have access to a Param, and I feel bad that not more people do.
We should probably not tease our audience with not explaining what it is.
Go for it.
Okay, so Lauren, you've got more 5th edition experience than I do, but so you can totally correct me if I'm wrong. But I did go through the playtest for 5th edition when it was being called D&D Next and stuff, and they were talking about the concept of bounding accuracy. So the concept of bounded accuracy is Pathfinder 2, Starfinder, and 5th edition all were trying to solve the same problem that the 3.0/3.5 system has, which is that eventually, because they made their bonuses on different curves, mathematical curves, so eventually the numbers and bonuses get so high that what you roll on the D20 is meaningless. And so, like, you would have, it's not uncommon to hear of like somebody having plus 40 something to a skill check in Pathfinder or 3rd edition. In which case, really, what does that dice mean? And because the DCs are also pretty static, it means that I can never fail this skill check, or I never have my AC is so low that monsters will never fail hitting me. In fact, just the normal progression to AC in Pathfinder, because of just how the math worked on the AC, is unless you were a stupidly dedicated tank, putting all your magic items and all your feats and all your abilities into being defensive, eventually armor class, even for a character who wears heavy armor, becomes so pointless that it's not about blocking hits, it's about blocking the follow-up hits. I mean, past level 10, monsters are going to hit you with their first attack, and you're hoping that your armor class is high enough to make sure that you block the second or third attacks, but you're going to take that first one.
And that's one of the things I like about what they're doing with the 2nd edition playtest, is that they're really trying to keep that math a little bit tighter.
Right.
And you can see that in the proficiency system to the ACs.
Right. And that 2nd edition playtest is trying to address that. Starfinder tried to address that. And 5th edition tried to address that. And they did so with the concept of bounding accuracy, which is they made sure that the bonuses to your rolls, your skill checks and your attack rolls, never got so high that they exceeded the possible values of the targets by more than what you could roll on a D20 dice. So they kept all the bonuses low. The ways that you could add bonuses and stack them was really trimmed back with the advantage-disadvantage system. And they made sure that the possible DCs were capped as well. So there's no such thing as a DC higher. There's no such thing as a DC 40 anything in 5th edition. So you will always have at least some concept of a chance of success, assuming that it's never pointless for you to roll the dice.
And that's a boon to it, but it's also one of my complaints about 5th edition, is that you can wholly spec your entire character focus upon being good at a particular thing and then fail it half the time.
Yeah, and that's something. Yeah, that's with second edition. Is really bad with that right now. The new DCs that they released helps with that. That was like a big problem with the system that they're trying to address with the new DCs, and I hope they run the whole game through the whole game math through the formulas again when they release the final second edition. But that was one of the things they were very specifically changing when we talked about the 1.3 patch.
I was going to say, you said that's what the rules are right now, and that's what the rules were pre 1.3, where the difference between being bad at something and being good at something was a range of 5, and we went from -2 to +3. And in our playtesting, I just found the only thing that matters is rolling a minimum 12 to 15, and it was like that's too high and too consistent, and it made things way more boring. And like, even though there's a whole system of critical hits and critical failures now based on +10, -10, the main thing that you're critical hitting and critical failing is an attack roll, and a critical failure is actually meaningless. So a lot of the time you were just kind of doing the shoot for the moon third attack, hoping that you get that 15 or that high enough roll that really it was way too much about the die roll and way too little about the spec of the character. So up to 1.3, where they made it so that the people that are bad at something are now at a -4 instead of a -2, which is a weird way of going, instead of just setting, if you're not good at something, you get no bonus, and then you just scale up from there. But it might be more of a patch that will be changed when second edition actually comes out. Because again, second edition's not out. And then lowering the DCs, I think that there's still some tinkering that needs to be done to get that sweet spot better and to get the numbers to work, but at least it's working better.
Right.
Like the part 2 playtest that we did started with the old ones and then did post 1.3 update, and it was much better after that update.
And that's one of the things that I'm really liking about the playtest right now, is that while it's obvious it still needs some time in the oven, you can see Paizo pulling it back out, checking the temperature, and making the changes that it needs before it goes back in.
Right. And the place where you can still see the two tough DCs is the monsters are all still overtuned, and they didn't patch the bestiaries. So the monsters are still there. Dice rolls, bonuses, and DCs are still much higher than players. And if you're playtesting right now, you will still feel that sense of failure fairly often, because while they have said they're going to revise those for the final published product, the scale of updating the entire bestiary was too much to put into a patch.
Which I believe I heard that there's going to be a new PFS scenario that comes out, and it's just going to have monsters tooled specifically for it, and it's going to be something that they would prefer people to use in playtest than some of the older adventures, specifically because it's geared towards the changes.
Yeah, and honestly, overall, I hate to say this, but the Pathfinder Society scenarios I've had a much better experience running those and playing those than I have with Doom's Play, because of the math and the fact that Doom's Play is very specifically stress testing parts of the game, and it's designed to be a test, not exactly a fun experience. So like you run into problems where we had like a whole field of difficult terrain, which is not something that would be practical to run in any actual encounter that you intended to have fun with.
Well, hey, Luis is in chat, and he's just said that he's the one writing that adventure we were just referencing.
Go, Luis! So I guess we have to disclose, Luis is one of ours, member of the podcast network. Also,
Luis Loza. He is both a Paizo employee and a network member. Also, he suggested we call this the Playtoost.
I like that name.
I like it way too much. So
I was hoping we weren't going to pay attention to that pun, but I guess now it's out.
That was foolish of you, Lauren.
Ryan runs this podcast. Every pun will be embraced.
Thank you.
And Starfinder also solved this problem but instead of doing, they leaned it more towards the 5th edition solution, but not entirely. They just sort of reined in the possible bonuses that could stack, so that you couldn't like super jump your bonuses, and controlled what was adding to the math, and tweak the normal formula that we're used to in Pathfinder 3.5, 3.0. instead of rebuilding it from the ground up, and they achieve the same result. The math is much tighter in Starfinder. You don't have the level 10 plus problems that present themselves in Pathfinder, where it's just the math goes crazy and you can't fail / can't succeed depending on what you're trying.
Couple of points from chat. El Poironot says, what about people passionately in the middle? And I believe he's making a joke, but there are some things that I am passionately neutral on, and I will defend my right to be neutral about them.
What are you passionately neutral on? How does that even work?
Sure, it's come up in a conversation, and I cannot think of an example, unfortunately. But trust me, it happens.
That is the essence of neutrality, where it's so neutral that you can't even recall.
Bard Wannabe agrees with you, Param, about the surveys being daunting and alienating, and he's a pretty passionate Pathfinder player, but he's given up on keeping up on the playtesting anyway and looks forward to what the rest of us come up with.
Man, just adding more pressure on us, aren't you? Go, y'all.
Not necessarily us. He said the rest of you. That could be all of the Pathfinder community.
Indeed.
And, all right. JJM Jester has a long post that I haven't had a chance to read, so let's see. Let me read it live and see how this plays out. He's been playing Pathfinder 1E since the beta, and been playing D&D 5E for about half a year now. The 5E lack of player options compared to Pathfinder is rough, but the overall play experience is much more enjoyable, he says. As the person who's usually a game master, 5th Ed is much more attractive to him to run the second game over Pathfinder, just his 2 cents. Yeah. All right, well, Lauren, you are the resident 5th edition player on the network. Any comment on anything that he said there?
So listen, I have a lot of opinions about the difference between Pathfinder and 5th edition D&D, and it really boils down to I refuse to call one better than the other. It's apples and oranges. 5th edition is so much more streamlined than the 1st edition of Pathfinder. It's easier to hand it to a new player, say, here's your level 1 fighter, let's go kill some monsters. But with Pathfinder, while you don't have that kind of streamlined playstyle, you do have so many more options for building your character. And I'm involved in too many different kinds of games, and I'm always frustrated when I go back to the 5th edition games because I'm like, let me think of a character I can make. Oh, here's an idea. Oh, wait, can't be done in 5th. Here's an idea, can't be done in 5th. And I'm constantly running into that. But then when you're sitting at the table, it's so much faster to just play 5th. For that reason, I always recommend Pathfinder for veterans of players, veterans of these games. I recommend 5th edition for maybe getting new people into the game.
Mm-hmm. I have had...
Dungeon Novice says you could say you're passionately neutral.
You, Dungeon Novice, you win a cookie. I've enjoyed what I've played of 5th edition. I think it's a very good system. It seems to be extremely balanced, extremely easy to run. My GM seems to love it a lot. And with the freedom of improvisation that it gives you, that Pathfinder kind of scares some GMs away because the system is so complicated with Pathfinder that you learn if you change parts without understanding the whole, you can accidentally break the game, which is fairly a big problem when you see in the Pathfinder communities where GMs will come up and say, hey, what if I make this change to the system? And then there will be a flood of people that will say, if you do that, it's going to also break this, and this. And it's like, it's the butterfly effect, you know. A kobold gets a +1 to a swing in a dungeon, and suddenly the kingdom of Ernest explodes as abelisks take over the world.
We're getting a lot of people making comments that they have given up on running Doomsday Dawn and participating in the playtest, which is a shame because participating in the playtest will lead to a better second edition, but Doomsday Dawn has a very aggressive schedule, and we're getting this weird message of like, this is the schedule, this is when you're supposed to be doing these by, but you don't have to. Mm-hmm. And it's like, then what even is this schedule? Like, yes, they're focusing on things, but the updates have all been chunks of updates. So 1.3 is not. 1.3 was a system-wide, but 1.4 is basically only Ancestry's been updated. Mm-hmm. And 1.1, or maybe 1.2, one of them was heavily death focused and death and recovery. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, if that's these are large things. So how does what's being changed and what's being play tested relate to the schedule we're supposed to be play testing at? And the only official word I've really heard is you can ignore the schedule.
And I think that's what we need is we just need more elaboration. We need more word to come down from on high and say, all right, so this is why we set those dates, and this is what matters after those dates.
Well, I can tell you why they set those dates, because if you space them out, it fills out the 6 months requirement to get the systems to the printers in order to publish it in August. I mean, that's no secret. You break up the book, and how do you space it out? Well, this is the only way you space it out that manages to get the January 31st deadline.
Yeah, but either they underestimated how much slower you'll play a game that you don't have system, that no one at the table has system mastery of, or they overestimated how dedicated people would be to just flat out playing a game that, like you've said, is not necessarily designed for fun. It's designed for playtesting. And anyone that's done video game playtesting knows that, like, people think it's a dream, but mostly it's just walking against every wall of every level to make sure your character doesn't walk through anything. It's boring stuff. It is the data entry of video game playing. And that's kind of how Doomsday Dawn is asking people to approach it. It's not just play the game and think about a couple of things in a meta level. It's play the game and break it down.
Yeah, and we have to talk about the length of these scenarios. They're like 8-9 hours long, or at least in our experience, that seems to be what we're seeing from the reports to do them. And that seems to be true throughout the playtest. That is a lot to ask for a group, especially when you go past 8 hours. That's more than a weekly group's total usual playtime. Your average game group games for 4 hours total, but that also includes BS time at the beginning of the session, and that's not an efficient session. So if you're second you hit 9 hours, that means that your average play group, even if they were dedicating their entire game time to playtesting this for Paizo, is not going to be able to fit it into a regular, normal weekly game night. I really think that it may have gone better if all the scenarios were kept to the length of a Pathfinder Society scenario, so that's a one and done sit down. At least then, like that's less daunting. Can I get a PFS scenario done in 2 weeks? Is a lot easier than can we schedule multiple play sessions, 3 or more, in 2 weeks.
Also, part 1, I think it's advertised as taking 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah,
and I think we did it in 2 hours. So I got in my head that it's like,
no, we did part 1 in 4 hours.
Okay, then maybe it was like advertised as 4 to 6 hours. No, we did it in closer to 3. Anyway, we did it on the lower end, and I got in my head that that's the pace we're going to go at, and we'll be fine. And so when we took above average time for part 2, and part 2 just, it was killing me as a GM. It starts really dull.
That was a massacre for our time.
Yeah.
For our time and my energy, and like, man, at the end of the first part of our 2-part recording for part 2, which I know is saying part 2 a lot, but I've forgotten the name of that adventure. Otherwise, that would make it a lot easier. I've got Doomsday Dawn right in front of me, but I'm not opening it. I'm moving on. So one of the problems for us is that Alex crit killed the boss at the end of part 1. So basically, our last real encounter was that skeleton fight, which was the slowest fight of them all, and was really boring for me as a GM because the skeletons had basically no options. I felt like I had fewer options than I did at 1E, and then I might... Oh, Impale Mountain Shadow. Thank you, Sluter. So, yeah, I felt like I had fewer options in 1E, and that I might as well just do the 3 attacks and not move, and I was squatting more than I've squatted since 3.0. It was like, this is a step back.
It was so many...
The Goblin encounter was fun and dynamic because there was positioning-based powers on the goblins, but there was none of that in skeletons, and so it's just like, there is no better use for my 3 actions than 3 attacks. And then the hyena fight at the beginning of Doomsday Dawn, of Impale Mountain Shadow, I also had nothing better to do than 3 attacks. And then the Knoll fight with the Scorpion, I also had nothing better to do than 3 attacks. And it's like, this is the exact same encounter 3 times in a row, even though one of them is a bunch of skeletons, one of them is 3 hyenas, one of them is 2 gnolls and a scorpion. Like, that should not have the exact same feeling.
Right.
And like a lot of the hyenas and the gnolls both have the same problem of that they have interesting things, but they're all riders. And so if I hit you, I trip you. Or if I hit you and I have 2 allies flanking you, I do extra damage. But that's not decision-based interesting things. That is, my decision is attack or find something else to do. If I attack, I get 4 or 5 extra interesting things.
Right.
Also, it ends up everyone in the party had the exact same AC. So even though I had one attack that did more damage and one attack that was a smaller penalty for doing extra attacks, because everyone had more AC, because the numbers were too tight and the proficiencies, I was like, I have no choice here. And so those 3 encounters in a row burned through so much of my goodwill for second edition that I just needed a break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's me.
Yeah. And we talked about it, and I was like kind of baffled because I've been running GMing Pathfinder Society playtests. You know, I was going to let you do the Doomsday stuff for the podcast, and I still wanted to get my GM stuff, so I went over and I've been doing that as part of my job as adventure officer. And that's not how it is at all in the PFS stuff. Like, all the monsters have these really neat things they're doing, and positioning matters, and the room matters. There's a slime in the bedroom, and there's bats, and the bats drop stuff in the slime, and it makes splashes happen. And then, like, all this really cool, flavorful stuff. They even made the zombies fun. And so you're telling me this, I'm like, it's an alternate universe. And then I kind of realized, oh, it's a play test. We're stress testing the exact same thing over and over and over again to see when it breaks.
And I think maybe vanilla monsters could be part of the point of that. I remember you told me that in the first part of Pale Mountain Shadow, they were really trying to test the difficult terrain mechanics. Mm-hmm. And we tested that extensively. So maybe not having interesting monsters was part of the design.
But it was also the carryover that the last encounter from part 1 also felt like that. And so it was like, if Alex hadn't successfully crit that guy and ended that encounter with the big boss at the end, and if you'd done things in a different order, the problem wouldn't be as bad. But vanilla monsters is a problem, and I got 3 vanilla monster encounters in a row. So by the second half of Doomsday Dawn, 2 things happened. 1.3 came out, and we updated that, and suddenly people's ACs were all over the place, which actually was more fun, because it meant that the guy in heavy armor is harder to hit than the guy in robes, which makes sense. And the other thing is that we got to the encounters with the elementals, and then even the mummies, which were just kind of like a bunch of mooks, played out a little more dynamically. So, yeah, the 1.3 change saved Pathfinder 2nd Edition for me, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. And the second half of that adventure was much better written for the playtest. And at least for the enjoyment of the GM, which right. I don't know how much that was factored in.
Well, no, and the players. When I figured out that the elementals were doing different things and had different tactics, that made that so much more enjoyable than just figuring out the optimal place to flank and backstab. Mm-hmm.
And the Griffin fight was pretty fun. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I had a great time with that.
Manticore.
Yeah.
Manticore.
We scared that Manticore away.
Yeah,
that was so fun.
It was the most fun encounter from the first part, but it was also, you just wailed on that thing. It was a one-sided encounter in your favor, which was fine because I had fun reacting to what you were doing.
Well, I had a bad time.
All the previous encounters had just, like you talk about, it was playtesting terrain because we had that difficult terrain to walk through. Then we had this big freaking river in the way. And it was just all these things were keeping us away from a monster. And I think that was supposed to be, how do you deal with a flying monster? But when we finally figured out, no, we can deal with this one, we just unloaded because we had a whole lot of pent-up frustration, and that thing was a giant squeaky stress ball.
I think there was also a little bit of like, oh, we could sleep, which means that we will be able to regain some of this stuff. And so you knew you can unload your most powerful stuff without a problem.
It helped. It was a big help.
Mm-hmm. So, a major takeaway is proceed with caution when it comes to Doomsday Dawn, which is unfortunate because when the playtest was announced and they said this adventure's coming out, it's going to have these maps exclusive to it. This is the only time you'll ever get to play Doomsday Dawn. That was one of the things I was really excited about. Yeah. And so it's kind of a bummer that among other things that I was excited about, like when we did our review, I definitely came down really hard on character creation, which has not changed enough to address my concern. So my concern is still, I don't think I'll ever enjoy making a character for 2nd edition, and therefore I will never be engaged in it in the same way I would be for 1st edition, unless they make some major changes to character creation. But at least I saw a lot of potential as a GM to have as much fun or more fun. And that's the stuff that when I was GMing it was like, oh, exploration mode is kind of a mess. I thought this would be really cool. And, oh, this 3-action economy system, that sounds really cool. And then the monsters I got did not take advantage of it at all. And so I've just taken a step back from the playtest and have just been reading up on it without actually participating in it, which is slowly piquing my interest back up to where it used to be. But boy, I did not expect to have this opinion at this point in this playtest.
Right.
Which is why it's good to always remember this is a playtest. These strong opinions are good for the health of the game in the future.
Yeah, and it's why I took the survey, and the survey had a lot of questions that addressed things I was concerned with. The major thing I'm worried about is that character creation is rigid, lacks depth, and that I will never be engaged with my character. And I don't know, like, I don't even want to playtest Doomsday Dawn as a player because I know that any problems I'm seeing might just because I don't care about my character. And I don't care about my character because I don't have the freedom that I want to have. And I've got first edition with 1 billion access points, so that if I pick up a miniature and it's like, oh, this guy's cool, I want to make a character based on him. Oh, but the only way I can get 2-weapon fighting is being a ranger. This guy doesn't look like a ranger, but he's got 2 weapons. Well, I throw out that miniature because that's one access point to the way I want to make a character. Or if I want to make a He-Man based barbarian and He-Man's got a big sword and rides a tiger, and it's like, there's no way to get a barbarian to ride a tiger. Well,
there he is.
There goes that concept.
You can ride a tiger.
Maybe that was a bad example.
Yeah, but
yeah, like like the fact that I have to find the fewest compromises to my character concept is not at all what I'm used to from first edition, and it is one of the things that I rejected fourth edition for. And it's my major concern. It's like, if I can't make a character any which way, if I have to follow these ABCs, I have to do this like systematic ability score generation, and everyone looks so similar. At least that's changed, but most of the other concerns are not being addressed yet.
And what's interesting is I had such an opposite perspective with the second edition playtest. Is here, you remember I was playing Inagi. I really fell in love with that character, and I've been trying to recreate her in 5th edition, in 1st edition Pathfinder, and I can't do it. Just the rules aren't there to recreate that character in anything other than 2nd edition.
So what part of her Inagi is 2nd edition specific? What can't you recreate in 1st edition?
So that character is an elf druid who does a lot with lightning, rides a horse, and uses a long bow. Surprisingly, there are no druid classes in 1st edition that can do all of those things. And on top of that, I have no way of getting rid of wild shape in 1st edition, and that's just not in the character. The character is not going to ride a horse and turn into a bear at the same time. It's useless.
Really, there's no druid archetype that gives up wild shape?
There are not druid archetypes that give up wild shape while retaining a lot of the other core features that I need, like getting an animal companion or being able to throw lightning through a bow. If you're being able to get lightning, then you cannot get rid of wild shape.
No, wasn't the throwing lightning through a bow flavor? I didn't think that was actually your mechanics.
So the mechanic is, it's a spell, and the spell does lightning damage. And since my spell focus was a bow, there's no reason not to just say I'm doing it through the bow.
So that part of it, you could, since you're just saying, that's not really a 1E problem. That's something that could be ported over.
For sure. An elf holding a bow, I think you'll get that in any edition of any game you ever pick up. It's the idea of having a druid that does lightning and rides a horse is apparently just difficult to do.
Well,
that's interesting.
Since we're talking about changes to the 2nd edition playtest, how about we talk about them changes to the 2nd edition playtest? Specifically 1.4, the update to the ancestries. Go
for it. You've read over the 1.4 changes to the ancestries?
I have. Okay, so how this works is they've updated the ancestries because of feedback that you didn't get enough about being the races weren't distinct enough and upon initial selection, because they leaned really heavily into choosing ancestry feats for everything that was special about your race, with the exception of movement speed, hit points, and vision mode. And vision mode was even something you had to select for some races or some ancestries. Even though I agree with the change, it's going to take me a while to fully switch my brain over from 30 years of calling them races. So my apologies there. But what this usually means is that what they've done is you know how there were heritage feats that you could only be taken at first level in the ancestries in the initial version of the playtest? They have now gotten rid of all the heritage feats, and now part of picking your ancestry is you now must pick a heritage as well. And the heritages now come with some of them are very similar to the heritage feats that you used to get, but now they seem to be more expanded. And a lot more of what we traditionally have thought about what a race in first edition got by just being that character is now being translated over to what heritage you pick. So let's just go ahead and give you an example. If you're an elf, you can choose between an Arctic elf, a cavern elf, a keen-eared elf, or a jungle elf, and you have to pick one of those. And let's say you pick keen-eared elf, because that seems to be the traditional elf that we're used to from first edition. It says that your ears are finely tuned and able and detect even the slightest whispers of the sound. As long as you can hear normally, you can use the seek action to sense creatures within 60-foot cone. And when you use the seek action to sense unseen creatures you can hear within 30 feet, you gain +2 circumstances. So that's leaning heavily into the eerie elf. With some of the ancestries, that's even more distinct. So for humans, let me pull up human here. They took the half-orc and half-elf ancestry feats that you used to have to pick as, and they've turned them into heritages. So now you don't have to spend your first level ancestry feat just to be a half-orc and feel that you didn't get a feat. Now you can just go human, half-orc, and then choose your first level ancestry feat. Like you would have in the initial version. So it's not quite as much the full bundle of stuff that you used to get. It's not all the way there. Like, for instance, gnomes. You don't get like the billion things you used to get for being gnomes. You can talk to rabbits, and you can cast spells, and you're good in the forest. Now you still have to take feats for some of those things, but just being a gnome, you can be a big bell. No, I'm looking at goblins. Okay. For being a gnome, you can be a bleachling, a deep gnome, a fell gnome, or a sharp-nosed gnome. And I think sharp-nosed gnome is the default gnome that we're used to from first edition. And so more of the stuff that we're used to has now been added back to the ancestry selection just for base selection. You still have to pick what type of gnome you are. And then they got rid of those what used to be considered must-pick feats because you could only pick them at first level. I believe did you have any of that pressure when you were building characters that, well, I should take the heritage feat if it's available because I'll never get a chance to take it again if I don't?
I had it constantly. I was always looking at... What's interesting is this is something that we were saying from the very beginning, before we'd even started playtesting this game. We were looking at the number of feats that you get at first level as part of your ancestry, and we were just saying, it's not enough. So this is really going to do a lot to help cement those characters into place, especially the flavors of them.
Now, I think my personal flavor on this is they could go a little bit further, give some more base abilities back to the ancestries, but this is the direction I kind of hope they go to. And it looks like they're mostly saying, like, your heritage is nature, and the ancestry feat you pick up is leaning more towards nurture.
Which I'm happy with, except it still doesn't address the problem of, well, how many people are nurturing their heritage and their ancestry in that way? Like, why is everyone consistently nurturing it at the same pace?
Right.
But it's a step in the right direction.
It is.
Yeah. And the other thing they did is they added more high-level ancestry feats, because with the initial version there was just a whole bunch of level 1s and a few level 6s. And now there are level 9 and 13 ancestry feats for everybody, so that so it doesn't it doesn't feel like you're just going to get all of these eventually anyway, which was the problem with their first system. It was like, well, eventually we're all going to have the same racial feats. It's just Joe over there learned to see in the dark earlier than I did.
Oh, Joe, that sneaky sneakster.
So I do like heritages in combination with backgrounds to create a little bit more. It's basically your two traits.
Right.
Only now one of them has to be a racial trait.
Right.
Race trait, race trait.
Mm-hmm.
It fits. That fits.
It does. It's just I still like more flexibility of having two traits.
Right.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, it's closer to what I like about first edition. Oh, but first edition is still right there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what I would really like to add to see added for people in your situation, Ryan, is just like some sort of addendum where it's like you could opt out of a heritage feat if you're done there, and just like instead of a heritage feat, you may now take something like rank up a skill or whatever the weakest common feat is. I know that they've intentionally designed these to be weaker than the general feats and the skill feats, so I don't know how that works, but like if there was just sort of an opt-out, it's like, I'm gnome enough, I want to do something else.
Can I multi-ancestry into human for a bit?
Well, actually, you
Yes.
can do multi-ancestries. There's rules for taking ancestries from the others, so that exists in the rules, but...
And that's actually someone I can see ranking up their ancestry, because it's like, really? I am a quarter human?
Right.
Well, I want to explore what being human is about, because I thought I was a gnome this whole time.
Well, I mean, like, you know, when my friends come back from, like, a year in Japan and they picked up all these new cultural changes in their attitudes and behaviors, which supposedly that's what the more of the ancestry feats are representing. It's more exploring the culture of being a gnome now, not just the fact that you suddenly sprout a third ear.
Maybe you're a human who was adopted by gnomes. It makes sense to have, a little bit from both sides.
So here's the thing. I can understand ranking up, basically getting more feats in your ancestry in all of these exception-based circumstances you've come up with, but in the standard, I'm just a half-orc, being a half-orc today, it's strange that I am forced to rank up. And so your opting out parent, your opting out solution is the one that makes sense. Like, I don't want to have to find an excuse for every character I make about why I'm becoming more of my ancestry.
That's a good point. And I like Param's idea of maybe instead of that, you improve the training on a skill or something.
Yeah. And it's ironic that human is the one that has opt-out built into the class, or built into the ancestry.
Why is that ironic?
But, well, it's just like the one that needs it least.
Okay. But it also thematically makes the most sense. Humans are the most flexible and therefore the most malleable.
Right.
Humans master ancestry.
And that is such a weird, like, why has that become a thing in fiction? Like, I want to see the fictional world where humans are considered the barbarian race. It's like, oh my gosh, it's a human. How did you survive an encounter with them? They eat meat.
You've given me an idea for a new campaign setting. I'm going to have to write this.
I do want to look back into chat for a bit. So, Silver Druid, you get points for suggesting that Lauren take an archetype that gives up. It was Silver Druid, right? Yeah, that gives up the animal companion and then takes the feats that lets you get an animal companion.
Yeah,
But
that's possible.
then Silver Druid loses points by saying that zero gnome is gnome enough. And now Lauren loses points for laughing at that.
It was good. I liked it.
He would have gained points if he said goblin.
Yes. The only good gnome is a gnome at somebody else's table.
Oh.
How dare you.
I actually liked what Pathfinder did to gnomes. They had a real identity problem in D&D, just because of how they evolved. And I like that Pathfinder says, no, these are fairy people.
So we did promise people a conversation about Kingmaker.
Oh my God, it's been an hour and we haven't talked about the topic of this episode. How did we do that? We're a normal podcast now.
So on the plus side, we have built up to something that all three of us can agree is pretty great.
Oh my God.
I love it.
Lauren, take the reins.
I have gotten so little schoolwork done because of this game. I am so behind on my research, like it's embarrassing. But I am in part 4 now, and I've probably made 6 or 7 different alts. So I'm getting work done in there somewhere. And let me talk about one of the things that's helping me in this game get my work done is these load times. I counted it. It honestly takes me 15 minutes from when I turn the game on till I can start adventuring, because I have to load into the main menu, then I load into the throne room, then I load into the town square, then I load into the map. And then I load into wherever I'm trying to go. 15 minutes. That is so much time to get paperwork done.
So, what are your computer specs? Because my load times for Kingmaker are I click the icon and a few seconds later I'm playing.
Well, you are a computer wizard, and this is a word processing computer. I play at I play on the very minimum specifications, and then I go into custom and make them even lower still.
Okay, so this is less concerned with Kingmaker and more concerned with your computer's a potato.
Oh, I am going to protest purely because I like this computer.
Hey, GLaDOS was a potato, and we all like GLaDOS.
If you
It's
want
not an
to,
insult.
if you want, and I can give you some advice on getting your computer upgraded without spending a lot of money.
Can you do that with laptops?
I absolutely can.
Well, then perhaps later we can talk about that.
How much video gaming do you usually play, Lauren? Since it sounds like you do not have the right computer for it.
More than I would like to admit, but normally I'm a console gamer. I only come over to PC for important events like this.
I'd say that's about me as well. I play the hell out of Duck Game at lunch at work, but other than that,
Game
yeah.
is the best. Oh my gosh, Duck Game.
Game.
We should play Duck Game sometime, Ryan.
Yes,
Game?
we could play Duck Game sometime.
We should
Daryl.
play Duck Game
You
on
do
the
not
stream
understand how much I
sometime.
enjoy Duck Game.
We can get people.
All right, so
Yes.
look, everyone knows about a Duck Game already, but just humor the chat and go ahead and explain it to the chat, because I'm sure they need to hear it.
Okay, so imagine Super Smash Brothers, but you're a duck and you grab guns.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
And the physics is so tight, and like there's so many different guns, and you learn them. Like the more you play, the more you're learning the nuance of the game, and there's just so much depth to what is ultimately just if Duck Hunt put the gun in somebody else's hands.
Yo, I'm ready to go on a tangent about so many games like that, but we definitely titled this episode Kingmaker.
Right.
Yes.
But we're doing a Duck Game stream. I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, so Kingmaker. Okay,
Yes.
besides
I only
load,
brought up Duck Game to qualify how much of a gamer I am.
Right.
I'm mostly a console gamer, and barely at that.
Okay. I am a avid and deep computer gamer. My passion for PC gaming and also console gaming and portable gaming rivals my passion for Pathfinder.
Yeah, I'd say that's been pretty clear. So what then, as the most experienced gamer of the group, what is your take on Kingmaker?
Okay. Well, if you're a Pathfinder player, this game is wonderful for you. If you love, especially if you're a Pathfinder player who has pined for the days of Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate, because they have so lovingly tried to imitate the style of those Infinity Engine games, the Baldur's Gate, the Icewind Dale, that they have copied the cursor, they have copied the phrasing for your voices, the character creation system, the portrait system. Like, so much of this game is just carbon cloning the Baldur's Gate engine to a degree that is ridiculous. So they know exactly the audience they're trying to pitch this game for, and a heavy knowledge of the Pathfinder rules will benefit you here. And it does do a fairly good job of adhering to those rules within the constraints of a Baldur's Gate type system, which is real-time with pause combat. But they did make some changes, like the skill system got massively trimmed. But if you're not a Pathfinder fan, you will have a very hard time with this game because it explains none of itself. It explains absolutely none of it. It just tosses you straight into the deep end and assumes that you know Pathfinder. Go make a character with surprising amount of content, because I expected it to basically be like the core rule book with a couple of bonuses, but there's a lot of advanced player's guide stuff in here, ultimate magic stuff is in here, ultimate combat stuff is in here. They even pulled some like far-reaching, like deep stuff, like they pulled Snowball out of People of the North.
Well, you need it if you're going to make the Eldritch Archer, which is what I play in this. Because that's the only ranged touch attack you have. One of the core things that I'm seeing, though, especially about you kind of need to know Pathfinder going in, and they don't do a good enough job explaining that to people, is a lot of players enjoy archery or firing spells into melee combat. And
Right.
it is not listed in enough places that you have to pay the feat tax of point-blank shot and precise shot. Too many people are going to be shooting bows and wonder why their characters are absolute garbage at it because they don't have both of those feats.
Bard Wannabe is pointing out that Snowball's in Ultimate Wilderness now, and while that is true, the version of Snowball that is in this game is not the Ultimate Wilderness Nerf version. It is the full OP Pathfinder Society complained about it Snowball.
Also, since we're talking about chat, Justin Sluter said that he is playing Kingmaker as we speak, and his kingdom was just destroyed.
Oh no, we're sorry, Justin. It was our fault.
And that is
Was it?
another... That is also something that needs to be talked about, because right now the kingdom system has so many bugs in it that it's almost unplayable. I have very good friends who have had the same event hit them 4 times in a row in the span of a few days, to where they're automatically going to lose their kingdom no matter what they do.
Wow.
There are a lot of bugs in the game, and the random encounter chart is kind of crazy. So do save your game a lot, and not just in the same slot. They are doing massive patches to this game almost every day. I just downloaded a 5 gigabyte patch to address some of these bugs, so at least they do seem to be committed to fixing the bugs, not just leaving them in place. But like even when the game launched, one of the 3 possible endings was bugged and would fail on you. So that was kind of a big deal that needed to be changed. So yeah, it's a buggy game.
It definitely needed more time in the oven. I mean, the entire crafting system was just left out because they didn't have time to finish it. So I'm really interested to see how they continue to develop this game forward, especially with all the time that they are obviously putting into it still.
Right. So that is some of the distractions of the game we talked about, but let's talk about the writing. These characters are so deep. They're written so well, and I just love exploring. Like I'm live streaming this for our viewers. So when I'm playing this game, I am putting it on Twitch. I am then exporting those episodes to YouTube for anybody that wants to follow along my playthrough. I'm doing it blind, so that's the only playthrough I'm doing, and that's the reason I'm not as far along as I would love to be, because I'm not playing when I'm unable to stream it. And it has sort of paused me, but if I was playing this alone and not accountable to anyone, I would just be sitting there going, tell me more about this backstory, NPC. I want to know every single thing about you, cute halfling girl.
It's really one of the strong points.
Yeah, and that's because they got Chris Avalon involved with this, and his pedigree in game storytelling. He did KOTOR 2, New Vegas, Neverwinter Nights 2. His pedigree in the gaming world is hard to even touch.
Speaking of the writing, I mean, these character missions are just so strong. I just finished the character mission for Queen Bey, obviously Amiri, and I mean, I had a hard time not breaking down in the middle of it. It was just so good and so strong. Amiri, you're so powerful, but are you too powerful?
Miri is so glorious in this. She is much more barbarian than I thought she would be, but she's just super aggressive, wants to smash everything, but she's really charming about the like, I'm really impressed with the various ways she wants to smash everything. And also that she very much dislikes that purple gnome jerk that is one of the early antagonists of the game. That darn purple gnome.
Yeah, he was a good villain. Albeit a little bit predictable, he was still real easy to just enjoy kicking his teeth in.
Yeah. Now we don't want to get into spoiler territory, even though I imagine a lot of our listeners are familiar with Kingmaker storyline because it's a very popular and old adventure path, and this does stick to it fairly good. They did add a 7th chapter to the game. That's worth pointing out. I haven't gotten there yet, but they
also added a prequel. So it starts earlier than the adventure path and ends later than the adventure path.
Yeah. And for a lot of this game, you're going to be on a time limit. Now, the time limit is a little bit generous. It's not quite as strict as I've seen time limits of similar games, like Fallout 1. The original Fallout had like a super hard time limit. But you do pay attention to it, and don't just think you've got infinite time to just rest and refresh spell cycles. You've got to at least keep progress going, or you will fail the game just due to running out of time.
Which can cause some issues when you're needing to go to the other side of the map to solve some plot missions. But at the same time, you have to wait for one advisor to finish their task so you can put them on the next problem. But while you're on the other side of the mountains, you can't manage that.
Right. This game would benefit strongly if we could get ponies.
Oh my god, we need ponies.
Yeah. So what the question is from Donata Classic, what are we playing in our Kingmaker games? Let's start with Ryan, since he said the least.
So I am trying to replicate Geralite, who was my character when I played Kingmaker on the tabletop the second time, who was actually I believe I got up to Baroness of the Kingdom of Winfrey. And it was an interesting challenge because, so I sat down and I was like, all right, what character am I going to play? And it was just a buffet of options. So I was like, oh, I should recreate Geralite. The thing is that Geralite was a time thief, which is a third-party class from... not Super Genius Game, Rogue Genius Games. And so obviously that's not in the game. And she took Amateur Gunslinger. So she was kind of known for her pistol and her time manipulation powers. And I was like, well, this is going to be an interesting challenge. But it was not. I actually came up with the Rogue archetype, whatever it is, the one that's a little bit wizard. And I looked over my options there, and it's like, yeah, this pretty closely recreates what Geralite could do in combat and allows me to also have the similar ability score array. So she is a human rogue with the whatever the spellcasting archetype is. But speaking of the hard to figure out how the game works, I could not figure out what my casting ability score is. I would have loved for it to be charisma, which feels thematically on point for a rogue, but I just don't know. And so I made my charisma and my intelligence both 16 instead of putting my charisma up to 18 and having a more reasonable intelligence, just because the rules were not helpful, no matter where I looked on that game, other than an asterisk next to my intelligence and my dex, which made me believe that those were the game was telling me those were my important ability scores. I don't know what else I'm supposed to. I don't know how my main powers work.
So I'm playing the closest facsimile that I can to Ainagi right now, where I have her just as an elf, eldritch archer, so one of the Magus archetypes, because that way I can at least cast spells through an arrow. And honestly, I knew going into it that Magus isn't exactly the most tuned class, but it's been fun. It's worked really well. And once you pick up one of these NPCs, I don't know how many spoilers we're looking at, but one of these NPCs is a straight butcher. After picking him up, it's been a lot easier.
And Param, what are you playing?
So I started off for the stream. I decided that I'd make Param actually the namesake for my nickname. So I recreated my original Pathfinder character, which is a halfling wizard illusionist with a familiar, and the game let me even get the rabbit familiar, which is not core, which is really ancillary. So it's another part of the game that like deep dives into like soft cover rulebooks, which surprised me. So I made a halfling wizard illusionist, and that made the beginning of the game really rough because in the opening prequel, the part they added to the game, you start off getting ambushed, and I was playing a squishy, and then I picked up a squishy bard that was a ranged focus bard, and then immediately picked up a squishy sorcerer. And it was real rough times until we picked up the fighter, and then that at least was bearable. But getting to that point, man, it was just like, okay, save and reload because we're all going to die when somebody breathes on us.
That was a strange design choice to put two squishies right at the front.
Right.
Also, Silver Druid in chat is telling me the Eldritch Scoundrel. That's the name of my archetype.
I'm pretty sure you're an intelligence-based caster as well.
Yeah, I'm
Pretty
pretty
sure
sure
I am
that's the
too.
case.
Which
Rogues
is
almost
unfortunate
always
because
cast on me.
Geraldine was really known for her charisma.
But that's a good point, is that there's no tooltip you can click over to show you, yes, it is certainly intelligence-based.
And there's some other
Now,
things.
what
that
about
are
your
rough.
companions?
Okay.
What are some? Who did you pick up?
Well, I'm real early on because I'm doing the stream, so I'm still in chapter 1 or book 1. And
So you're starting companions.
Yeah, so I've got the crew. I haven't picked up any extras. So I've got the fighter. Oh, well, it does matter what alignment and choices I made in the prequel. So I ended up with the good collection. So I've got a Miri, I've got the, I forget the names, but I've got the fighter, and I've got the bard with me, and I'm a wizard. So that actually turned into a pretty balanced selection. The bard is having to handle all of our curing things, and she's not the best at it because now one of my fighter got blind cast on her, and she's been permanently blind for several hours of play now, and
Oh, wow.
and that's not cool, and that's where I ran into another little rough part of the game. So I picked up a cleric in the wild as part of the storyline that I won't spoil, but he's like, I'm gonna go be back at your base, and then I'll help you out, and tell me if you find this tree thing I'm looking for. So I head back to the base after I think I found the thing he's looking for, but evidently I needed to go further down that quest line to make him happy. But I'm like, my fighter's blind, help me, priest dude. And he's like, and so I need priest services, great. And then it opens up, I'll sell you a bunch of scrolls. I'm like, well, that doesn't help me. Like, I need you to use this scroll on my fighter. So anyway, I bought the scroll, which is much more expensive than spellcasting services are supposed to be. And like, this game is being real stingy with money. It's being Pathfinder stingy with money. So, and I wanted that bag of holding too, because, oh my god, do you need to pay attention to your weight limit in this game. So I bought the scroll, and I was like, okay. Clicked over to my bard. I just bought the scroll, and I'm like, use the scroll. And she does, and cast it immediately on the cleric dude. So that was unintuitive, and I'm glad I'm quick saving pretty much every 3 steps.
I'm still using most of the core people. I have Valerie the fighter. But honestly, when I started the game, I could not wait to get rid of Valerie. But as her characters developed and as her stories developed, I absolutely love her. I think she's just the greatest. I still use her. I still use Harem, the cleric of Grotus. I love his apathetic, nihilistic attitude. I still use Lindsay because you gotta have a good support caster, and that ain't me. And I don't even remember who the other person... Oh, obviously Queen Bey. I will never get rid of her, no matter what.
So I still have my starting companions, which is a Miri. And we all managed to get a Miri. I wonder if no
I think
matter
you're
what you
guaranteed
do,
to get a Miri.
You get a Miri. Okay. Because I also have Harem, the cleric, the dwarven cleric. And my third is Jethal, the undead elf.
Oh, I hate
Oh,
her.
interesting.
Urgathoa.
You got the
Yeah,
exact
well-
opposite pick that I got.
So I don't have Lindsay, which it's funny because she continues to narrate my story, even though she's not one of my companions.
That is...
Yeah, she even tells me off. She's like, "Oh no, you're much too evil for me. I'm going with this gnome."
Wait, what? She goes
know.
with the evil, mustache-twirling purple gnome?
Yes, because the other option was me. Because at one point, when given the choice of helping some guards or continuing on my mission, I chose to let the guards burn in a fire. And then when told to defend it, I'm like, they're doing their job. They protect people like me, royalty. Which apparently she took as an evil act.
She made the right choice.
I disagree.
Oh, man.
I felt bad about saving those guards, actually, because I'm like, there's a priority of emergencies. Triage needs to take place here.
I definitely
Which is
saved the
one
guards.
of the reasons that I let them do their duty, and they just happen to die doing their duty.
I don't know if I've given Jarethal a fair shake. I just do not like her character. And I don't know how you use an Inquisitor. It seems like she's just not good at doing anything I assign her to.
Well, that is the Inquisitor.
So I haven't gotten that deep into the game where I have been having problems with her, but otherwise I feel like I've got a pretty balanced party. I've got the warrior, I've got the healer, the inquisitor is useful in a lot of ways that I'm not, and I'm the rogue. So I'm pretty happy with my balance.
Mm-hmm. I do have a complaint about characters, though. One of the things they advertised was if you wanted to create your own full party, you could, which has been a staple of all these games in the past. You could just okay, I'm going to create more than one custom character to come, and you have your main character, and then you can create custom party members, and that was common for hey, if I want to remake my real tabletop group, I want to make my friend's character to join me, and so on and so forth. And you can do that in this game, but they put this really expensive fee to hire them that is just a complete barrier for entry, because if you're going to do that, you're going to want to do it right away. And then right off the bat, it was I can't afford that. It would be every penny I have, plus I'd have to sell half my stuff. And this game is already putting financial pressure on me, so I wasn't able to just I need a cleric, so let me make my copy of my player's cleric and just have a custom cleric join me.
And that price just increases exponentially. If you try to save up to have the gold for it, and then in the process you happen to level up, oh well, guess what?
Oh, no.
It just increased. The only thing you can really do is if you steal everything in the very beginning, you go to the steal everything. When it allows you to level up, don't do it. And if you purchase mercenaries at the very beginning while you're still level 1, they're only 500 apiece. You can get about 2 or 3 of them if you absolutely klepto the entire place.
Right. Well, what I'm thinking I might end up doing is, because I really disagree with this design choice, is I might just cheat engine myself enough gold to hire somebody.
I would as well, yeah.
I have no qualms about cheating on a game if I'm not having a good time with the rules that it's presenting, especially a single-player game.
Yeah, that's fair. Russ Brown in chat is asking if I'm lawful evil. I am lawful neutral. I just happen to choose a lawful evil option at one point.
And it looks like this game is accounting for alignment shifts, because every so often it asks you to make a choice base that has alignment tags, and it will shift your alignment in that direction if you choose it.
I've shifted from chaotic neutral, and I am now chaotic good, which is very telling about who I am as a person.
Cryptwalker76 says, is that the guy you run into near all logs near the start? I presume Cryptwalker is talking about the mercenary person, and yes, they are at Olags, where you can hire them. They're right outside the main door at Olags.
I think their name is Anaril Eight Eyes, the Pathfinder person.
Also, El Purante, I hope I got that right, says, I ran the first 3 chapters with a single sorcerer and had to sell my kidney to hire a level 13 companion. 83,000 gold pieces.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that is worth giving up a kidney for. Also, Luis is suggesting that I am passionate neutral. Works for me.
Except you were dispassionate when you had to save those guards, so I don't know.
So,
they have a duty. I left them to perform it.
But I am super eager to get back into this game. I've been itching to play this game ever since it came out. And every time I'm looking at free time, I'm like, can I squeeze in a Kingmaker stream right now?
One of my favorite things about Kingmaker at the moment actually has very little to do with Kingmaker. It has to do with the number of people who aren't already familiar with Pathfinder who I'm able to get into this game and now got them kind of thinking about maybe to come play Society with me.
Well, that'll be really ironic in August.
Yeah, that's true.
Graham, that's the second time you've used ironic in this chat. That's not usually one of your words.
Well, it's just because 2 things were ironic.
That's 3. I mean...
One thing I did like was how that cutscene was... So the one we're talking about where we let the guards burn? Where it just cut to, and now you're reading a page in a book, and you were just presented with a couple of options, and it kind of rushed past a few things, and that actually felt very Pathfinder to me. It was you're doing encounters, now we are changing the pace, so we are changing how you are presented information. And same thing with exploration when it cuts to the map with like a very miniature looking pawn moving around on it. It's like I don't just feel like I'm not just playing a game that uses Pathfinder as an engine. It's trying to make me yearn for the Pathfinder tabletop experience while also giving me stuff that I cannot that like is exclusive to this video game.
I agree. The very first time I beat a random encounter and then the little ogre just fell over on the map, I was like, yes!
That was pretty great. Like, I killed it, knock it over. One of the things that's kind of frustrating me right now is how obvious it was that they were trying to implement a crafting system and then pulled it out at the last second.
Well, you can
For
cook.
instance, I'm level 10. I'm level 11 now. My Amiri is level 11, and her ginormous sword is still only +1. And I do not have any way of making it better. And that's very frustrating to me. That's her signature thing, and it's stuck at, level 4 power.
Is there any way to swap the sword out, or do they give you better Amiri swords later?
This was also a frost giant sword that we found lying around, and it's just better than yours, Amiri.
So what they did an absolute amazing job with is if you go to take it from Amiri, she fusses at you and says something along the lines of, "That's mine, you can't have it." And it's great. But then it's like, if I gave her weapon-focused bastard swords, because that's what she uses an oversized bastard sword, I can now give her a one-handed bastard sword. It's not working.
Oh yeah, because they have the multiple weapon groups, I guess you could equip her with an alternate set.
I could, but then she's not focused in what she uses, and that just doesn't feel like I'm being true to the character. You should always be true to the character.
Agreed.
Now, the storybook sequences you were talking about, that was something we first saw with a game called Pillars of Eternity, which kind of started this, it was a Kickstarter game from some of the people that worked on this game worked on that game. Chris Avalon specifically, too, who was with, because Obsidian, one of the, so there has to be something involved with that Obsidian deal and the creation of Alcat. That sounds like these things must be related in the past because of how much crossover of talent there is and the nature of the licenses, etc. But
I think you're rushing over the Obsidian deal. Do you want to refresh people?
Okay, so when a while back, Obsidian announced a partnership with a license to make Pathfinder games, and so if you remember, we put up a posting. There's some drama involved or embarrassment involved with that, but we put up a posting and it broke viral of like the Gen Con banner, the Obsidian and Pathfinder all in one place. And at the time, Obsidian was making RPGs, turn-based RPGs. They made some of those old Infinity Engine games that we love so much. They were just about to release Pillars of Eternity, which was another throwback to those, and it seemed like a natural fit. We thought they would make this game. Well, maybe not Kingmaker, but we thought they would make Pathfinder the Baldur's Gate. It ended up they made Pathfinder the card game instead, and didn't make Pathfinder the Baldur's Gate. And so Alcat, a company that did not exist at all until they started working on this, pops up on the scene with a Kickstarter with a whole lot of talent from Obsidian. So I imagine there was something involved there, but I don't know anything about that. But that's just an interesting turn of events to end up where we are, to where we finally get Kingmaker.
Well, it could also just be that there was buzz about the idea of a Baldur's Gate type of Pathfinder game, and that not Chris Avalone, Steve Avalone, Stephen?
Chris Avalone.
It is Chris Avalone. Okay. Yeah, he may have just picked up on it because I believe it's been said that Owlcat brought this idea to Paizo, not the other way around.
Okay. Well, it's good. They did a good job with it.
That could
One thing
explain
that
part
threw
of
me
why
off-
it feels so much like Pathfinder.
One thing that threw me off is that there's a lot of voice acting at the beginning, and then it cuts to just printed dialogue for a chunk of it. And, like, is this just something I've never experienced? I'm either used to either a text-based game or a voice-based game.
This is pretty common with limited budget games where you voice your main scenes and then you let text handle the rest, because the amount of text that's required for a long session RPG like this is several full-length novels worth of writing that needs to be voice acted. And so a fully voice-acted RPG is a budget that is just insane. So what you often have with not AAA RPGs, and even a lot of AAA RPGs, you see this a lot with Japanese RPGs, where they will voice the main cutscenes, like the big moments, especially at the beginning, at the end, and then the chapters transitions. But the rest of the game will be text-based. And I'm actually was really thankful. Like, I would have preferred a fully voiced game. Yeah, it would have been better. But I was actually thankful when they stopped talking about everything because I'm streaming it, because then at least it let me do something during all these talkie points, which was my best Ryan Costello impersonation with funny voices.
All right. I have not caught up on your stream, so now I feel compelled to, because of my ego, I guess. Once you bring me into it, then I've got to check it out.
Because as soon as I don't want their viewers to just like sit there and watch me read text without anything going. So like I'm doing full voice acting for all the NPCs and reading out all their dialogue.
Excellent.
If that voice acting is as good as it is when we do plays of the game, then it must be truly amazing.
It is terrible. It is. I have me and accents have. It's like that's my big weakness as a GM is I can't have a hard time doing voices. So I'm trying my best here. And I'm trying to do what I can.
Are you failing adorably?
I hope so. I'm doing I'm doing the thing where I'm just doing impersonations of other voices and or actors, because I can't do cultural voice accents. I can't do it. I can't do a London accent. I can't do Cockney. I can't do an Asian accent. I've tried. I've taken classes. I just can't do it.
You've taken classes, really?
Yeah. Because I was so frustrated with it, I took a class on accents.
Wow. Let's put a pin in that. That's something that I think I'd like to talk to at length in another episode. Lauren, was what you were about to say related to doing accents?
Oh, I already forgot.
Sorry.
I try to do accents. I'm good at doing monster accents. It's very easy to just go so far outside of the human norm that you do a decent job, especially when it's fantasy. But if I'm trying to play a character who I feel like has a good Russian accent, I can't hit it. I can't. I'll just sound
good.
stupid. That was no. It was literally 2 words, and even they weren't good. But I do my best. And honestly, I try to learn a lot from the people around me. Like, if I hear an accent that I think is pretty good, I try to listen to it. Like, I try to emulate a lot of the way you do Xavier, because I thought that was good for French, a kind of French thing. I liked Perham's creepy rogue. I think that I try to draw from that. When I hear good accents, I just try to emulate them.
We have a comment here that's kind of important. PKD fan, and now that he mentions it, it is true. I am quite wrong. Owlcat's a rushing studio with the only Obsidian connection that they're aware of being Avalon, and who hasn't been with Obsidian in a while, and the split was not nice, and that is true. Chris Avalon's split from Obsidian made big news splash in the game space, and it was not a pleasant parting.
Sorry, you know what? Kingmaker just opened up on my computer. You guys hear it? Sorry.
Ryan, you have to wait, okay? We're not. You can't do that in the middle of this.
Just talk amongst yourselves. It's not being broadcast at all?
No, I can't pick it up. I can't pick up what your
good.
speakers play. I can only pick up what your microphone puts out.
Just making sure. So going over my notes, I was surprised by the first menu, which is you start a new game and then you customize your mode. It took me a while before I even realized that I'm basically setting the difficulty, and it gave me a lot of options that I had no context for.
That's really important to this game because it's real time with pause. I imagine that I would play this game a lot different if it was turn based with grid, but because like traditional tactics just don't work. Like, I opened up a fight and I'm like, okay, Miri, charge that one. I want Valerie, I need you to block this line and get it in front there. I'm going to move over here to get a better line of attack. And then Bard, I want you to just stay here and just plink at their back line to distract them. and like I pause the game, like unpause, and then everybody starts moving at once, that changes the game entirely because lines are getting intersected. The charge lane that I had wanted a Miri to go down is just completely blocked now, when that would never have happened in a first edition Pathfinder game. It would either have happened or not happened. But because everybody's moving at once, the whole game changes, and little things like aiming spells is difficult because spells have cast times, but people are still moving in real time. So you would line up a cast of a spell, and then one of your party members would just like waltz right on in.
And that's why the precise shot feat tax in this game in particular is extra egregious, because you can't pick out targets that aren't in melee when they immediately move into melee.
Yeah.
I also, as a ranged rogue, have no idea if I'm ever catching them flat-footed and getting them before they get initiative, because it just doesn't work the same way.
Mm-hmm.
For you just need 2 of your other party members to have them flanked, and now your sneak attack works. But that's not mentioned anywhere in game.
And that's contrary to Pathfinder's rules.
That at all.
It's not. I mean, you're right. It is contrary.
Yeah, so even if you are an experienced Pathfinder player, the fact that this game explains nothing, that's the biggest, like, if you look at this game in reviews, it got panned in some of the reviews. It's got a mixed rating on Steam. It took a lot of hits because it does not explain itself. It just is straight in the deep end. Here's Pathfinder with all its source books. Good luck. And they changed enough stuff that even, as we're discovering now, even experienced Pathfinder players are running into some problems because it's not explained.
And then you have the bugs.
And then the bugs. Yeah. The bugs are bad. And the fact that the random encounters can be, at level 1, you can run into Elder Water Elementals.
I saw that. It was interesting.
And there is no way to run from a fight. So that just means game over. Please hope you saved a minute ago.
Wow. And in all fairness, those water elementals are gorgeous.
Yeah.
You will
something's going to kill you.
Yeah. This is good indie grade graphics. The price is $40, which I don't think is too expensive for what you're getting, but most people that are used to indie pricing for games of this scope probably expected a $30 or a $20 price. So 40 is on the high end. That is pretty in line, at least with the other games we're seeing in this genre. Making these long RPGs cost a lot more money than making a pixel platformer.
And you get so much out of it. It's not even like you're spending something that you're not going to get. I probably already have 100 hours in it, which is why I'm not getting anything done.
Yeah, I'm hearing reports of 80, 100-hour playthroughs of this.
Yeah.
Well, to hear Mark Moreland describe the size of the script, the book, the Bible for the game, it was massive. It was larger than the core rulebook. And it's all dialogue, and it's all stuff that he had to go through to make sure that it was, franchise accurate. So, this is a game that has a wealth of content to it.
Yeah, we've been asking, what's Mark been up to lately? We know now.
He's the franchise manager,
right?
So he's handling things like, licenses and the expansion of Pathfinder as a brand,
right?
In talking about the lore in this game, that's just one of the things that they really knocked out of the park. Even for people who are experienced with Galarian, sometimes you're going to be like, wait, what was that nation? In the dialogue, it's bolded, and you can click over it, and it will tell you more about that lore.
That's so wonderful.
So good.
Russ Brown is talking about the cave with the spider swarm. I've heard a lot of people say that the spider swarm killed them because they have no area of effect and can't run.
The spider swarms are kind of a meme now.
I've kind of looked into that because that's an early encounter, optional encounter with the invasion, the very first fight you have at Olog's, where you're supposed to prep for it, and I just completely missed it. Did not know that NPC was worth anything, and just like so people were asking me like, "Hey, what did you think of the spider swarm?" I'm like, "What spider swarm?
What spider swarm?" Yeah.
This needs a runaway button. It does need a runaway button.
All right.
For sure.
Pathfinder has running away, so a game based on Pathfinder should also include that option.
And I think these options are going to come as the developers continue to work on this product. I mean, that's really been the strength of Kingmaker so far, is that every day there's a new patch trying to fix issues that the last patch caused.
Yeah, and we don't know how well it did, because how well it did will determine, if it gets a sequel and things like that. The video game market is very cutthroat, even more so than the tabletop market. But we do know that it spent several days on its launch at the top of the Steam sales charts. So that is good. In the #1 storefront for PC games, it was the top seller for several days.
I'm interested to see what this does for the Pathfinder tabletop in particular, because it was Baldur's Gate that got me into tabletops at all. I started 2nd edition so I could play my Kensei. So I'm hoping that this has a lot of that same effect for Pathfinder.
So, Param, you did say we can't tell how well it did. We do know it made almost $1 million on Kickstarter.
Right.
And delivered, which already, yes, it's been buggy, and they've been updating it, but it also is a pretty functional game, and it's got a lot of the features that it promised. Right. So, right from there, it's delivering, which is better than a lot of Kickstarter video game Kickstarters.
Right, but we mean how well it did financially, and $1 million is nothing at all in budgets for a game like this.
Mm-hmm.
Majuna says it's getting a lot of play on Twitch.
Yeah.
I mean, that's anecdotal, of course, but it is an anecdote.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the amount of Let's Plays happening, that's definitely a statistic. More successful games are going to have more Let's Plays.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to enjoy our Let's Play, please tune in and watch them on YouTube when we post them.
I forget, Param, are you also releasing those podcasts?
No, well, that would be weird.
I don't know. It's just, I'm asking.
I mean,
Come on, Ryan.
Seriously, guys, if you want that, tell me, but I don't know why anybody would want an audio-only stream of that game.
I can imagine Param just narrating it. All right, we're going to walk over here, and, there's some spider swarms. Looks like we're dead now.
And this is where I ran into the bug where my halfling fell through the floor.
So, to your point, Lauren, about how this is going to bring people to the hobby, it's such a weird time for this game to come out because it is really focused on the rules of Pathfinder First Edition at a time where Pathfinder First Edition is being, not mothballed, but it's being deprioritized in favor of an edition that's not out yet. So if somebody new comes into the hobby and it's like, I want to play Pathfinder, it's like, great. They printed a certain number of these playtest rulebooks based on what people ordered. You're going to have to wait several months for the actual content or try and track down one of these playtest rules knowing it's a limited time run for this particular product, or play the version of the game that you're familiar with, but that one's kind of been retired. And it's also, we joked about it with Stephen last week, but it's probably taken away from focus on the playtest. People that could have been giving up their time to play the playtest probably want to give up their time to play Kingmaker.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it, and it's definitely feeling true right now. I'm giving up a lot of time for this game that I shouldn't be giving up.
Mm-hmm. This is actually not unusual for the history of D&D based games, especially if we're talking about the Infinity Engine games. The Baldur's Gate series came out, and Baldur's Gate 2 had expansion packs launching after 3rd edition had launched, and that was using the 2nd edition rules. Then Neverwinter Nights came out right before after 3.5 had come out, and Neverwinter Nights 2 came out just in time to greet 4th edition. So, the history of D&D and its games have always been the cool video game comes out right after we switch to the next rule set.
And if I remember right, a lot of the expansions, those titles, were featuring contents from the new editions, even if the core mechanics weren't.
Right, they did start working in, stuff in classes from 3rd edition into those later Baldur's Gate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Majuna in chat argues that it could be a positive for newcomers because one is intimidated because of the amount of content. So it's true. You walk into a gaming store, and if you've got an educated game store owner, they can tell you, well, if you wait a few months, then it'll be a good jumping on point for Pathfinder.
That's not what they're going to say.
Yeah, all right.
They're going to say, oh, well, you might want to pick up that 5th edition game because any game store with a manager worth his salt is not going to refuse to sell a book at the point in time when you're going to, because if you turn that customer away, they're not going to come back and buy that book in 6 months.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And El Poironauts supports the idea that his group, or their group, this game made their group go back to Pathfinder First Edition.
Pathfinder First Edition is a great game.
It is a great game. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I probably play it 3 times a week. It's a problem. I'm definitely addicted.
I think we're about ready to wrap things up. Is there any final thoughts on Kingmaker, Lauren?
I'm interested to see how they develop it. I'm interested to see a lot of the other classes come out, like Kineticist and the Witch especially. There are witches in the game. You will never be one of them until this new DLC comes out.
Actually, that's an interesting point. You're saying as the game develops, but it's a good combination that this is a game that features a lot of replayability and it's getting patched. So you're playing it now, probably already thinking about the next character you're going to play, the next kingdom you're going to build, and it's like, oh, and they fixed the game so that when I replay it, it's going to be a little smoother, probably run faster, and will be a slightly different experience than what I got the first time.
Did I mention that I have 7 alternate characters? I'm thinking a lot about my next character.
You're going to burn yourself
Made
out.
or like conceived?
No, I made them. I get all my
Nice.
characters through the tutorial, see how I feel about them, and then I go back to my Magus just so I can keep pushing the story, see what happens with the Miri.
And is the idea that you're going to try and do one for every alignment?
Oh god, I can't. I really don't like playing I don't like playing good or lawful, so I'm pretty restricted. No, I just play different builds that are interesting. One build is a 2-weapon fighting sword board cleric who's inspired by Viking shield maidens just because it's fun.
Param, your final thoughts on Kingmaker?
I am having a blast with it, and I hope that this is the proof of concept that is needed to see more Pathfinder video games come out in the future.
And I think my final thought is that this actually, even though I just was talking about the strangeness of the timing, this came out as a good time for me because I was getting burned out on that playtest. So just a reminder that it's like, there's a lot more to Pathfinder than just the core rulebook. And there's a lot to love. There's a lot I do love about it. And so this let me get back into Pathfinder in a way that was satisfying to me, that didn't require a lot of commitment with other people, and also made me even kind of nostalgic because I did play Kingmaker 5-6 years ago at this point. So Pathfinder's been around long enough that I could look back on it as the good old days.
And it just proves so much that the lore of Pathfinder can stand on its own 2 feet.
And another thing, I mentioned this on the stream, but another reason I like that it's out there is I've heard of a whole lot of people start Kingmaker games. I've not heard of a whole lot of people finishing Kingmaker games. So you might actually get to see the endings.
And more. Actually, I guess we didn't really talk about this. So the prequel, I really appreciated. So the game normally starts around that Oleg trading post, and everything that happens before it is just kind of your character creation, where you know that the Sword Lords send you off to this land because it's ripe for a claim to be staked. So having that as actually like, you are proving your worth, you were just kind of invited with a whole bunch of other people, and you know that other people were sent out to claim neighboring lands. So it was cool to interact with that part of the story, and then show up with Oleg's and feeling more complete of a character in my first session, like, than I was when I started my first session.
After having made exactly too many characters, I really wish I could skip that tutorial and just go straight to Oleg's, but that option's not there.
Oh, interesting. But it's not just a tutorial. I mean, it's you're learning your new character. Like, don't you want a few encounters that you can splat through?
No, it hands you 2 squishies at the start.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hurts.
And all the scripted events that you can't get through. You know how many times I've watched that frost giant walk over that poor dude on the left? So many times.
7 times.
Yeah, too many.
And that's a common complaint with computer RPGs that don't let you skip the intro chapter. So many times have I rode down that wagon in Skyrim.
Don't get me started. Do not get me started.
You mean Dovahkiin likes Skyrim?
Oh, who'da thunk it? I got every trophy that game has to offer 3 times over. That's how much Skyrim I've played.
Wow.
You need to get you playing the VR version.
And literally 3 different accounts so I could keep track of the trophy progress.
Are we about ready to wrap things up here then?
We are.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of No Direction. Before we go, a couple of things we want to bring your attention to. I am helping with the promotion of a Kickstarter for a company called Bannerless Builds, and the Kickstarter is for a product line called Fantasy Facades. This is something that I've been hinting at for a couple of episodes now. The really thing I want to bring your attention to is that we launched the first video for the stress tests that we're doing. It is in the vein of the Will It Blend videos that went viral, where they were just promoting just how awesome this blender was, and they would put matches and Hot Wheels cars into the blender just to see what would happen. So that's very much what we're doing. Our production quality is a little lower, but it's lightly to not scripted, and it's just to see just how much damage we can do to these fantasy facades, which, if I haven't explained, it's 2.5D, where it is kind of like the set. It's the set of a movie. So actually, Blazing Saddles is the example that Greg used. Greg is the one who's running the Kickstarter. Blazing Saddles has a scene where at one point they have to fake a city, so they just put up some 2-dimensional pictures that look like they have more depth than they have. So the idea is to bring that to your tabletop, where you can set up a whole line of shops, a whole bunch of buildings very quickly, and then you're able to set it up and tear it down in minutes and store it in a shoebox. So each of these fantasy facades takes a brutal beating across these videos. We've released the first one, which is how they stand up to gamer rage, and I was given a fantasy facade to try and destroy with my bare hands.
How'd it go? Did you break it?
No, I will spoil that much and say that it broke me. That in the video I do talk about getting blisters in my hand. I don't talk about the bruised bruised heel I ended up with after I tried to stomp it. But for a couple of days there, I was worried I might have chipped a bone in my foot.
Oh, no.
And I might have to see a hospital. Luckily, it healed, and I'm fine now.
I watched that video, and I just could see you getting angrier and angrier.
Now, it's all controlled and performed rage. Mm-hmm. I just am very good at performing rage.
I definitely struggle to picture a hulked out Costello. That's not easy for me.
Have you watched the video yet?
I did. I was doing homework.
You were playing Kingmaker.
What? You could have been playing Kingmaker.
I could have been. I booted it up. I started, and I was like, no, I really got to get this Oakham done.
Well, I do have a reputation for accidentally destroying everything that I touch, and these videos actually make people question just how destructive my hands really are. Param, is there anything you want to shout out to?
No, not this week.
All right. Lauren, is there anything besides your column that you want to shout out to?
No, not really. I've spoken quite a bit.
All right, then tell people where they can get to know you, to read your column, and to send you questions they might have.
Well, everybody should already be familiar with the NoDirectionPodcast.com blog. It's from there that you can find the Dear Dovahkiin column. You can see some of the questions that people have written in. You can see some of the answers that Ryan has famously said are not quite blue, not quite red, I believe. A little bit of the purple.
No, that it's you cover red and you cover blue without giving purple.
Oh, okay.
The idea is the purple represents a compromise, and where it's like, I need an answer, and that answer has to be blue or red. You give the blue answer and you give the red answer without telling them, oh, just kind of blend all of the problems you have together, and that'll solve your problems.
Anytime I hear you explain it, I just hear it as such a compliment, and I'm like, yeah, that's really good. But then 5 minutes later, I'm like, wait, how does this
No, it is a compliment. Most people, when they give advice, try and find the middle ground instead of saying, these are your 2 solid options.
And what I talk about, or the kind of questions that people send me, is they send me, hey, how do I get my players back on track with the story without railroading them? I've got someone in my game who's being a little bit disruptive. How do I deal with that? Pretty much, I like to take on any of your questions that you have. How can your game run better? How can your group run better? And I'll answer those to the best that I can. I will overthink it 7 ways till Tuesday and then give you what I think is the best. Send me those advice questions. Send them to us on Twitch. Send them to Dear Dova Queen at Gmail. Send them to our Facebook. Any way that you can get them to me, I would love to take them on.
Also, often on a Monday afternoon, you will ask our Discord if people have any questions for you.
That's right. Monday is the day that I really start seeing which one I'm going to answer for the week, but I'll take them anytime. I've got a little bank that I put all the questions in, and then Monday I go on there, I see what I want to answer, and I see if Discord wants to add anything to it.
Mm-hmm. So which one is the D8?
That you'll have to wait for the next blog, Ryan.
Okay. Finally, I'll get my question answered.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Garm, where can people find out more about the network in general?
Well, speaking of the Discord, if you want to join the chillest, most awesome Pathfinder Starfinder community and talk in a place without the dramas, I highly recommend the No Direction Discord server. You can find the link there at nodirectionpodcast.com, where you can also find the rest of our shows and blogs, because we have many fantastic podcasts on the network, including No Direction, No Direction Beyond, our Starfinder podcast, as well as Adventurous, our actual play podcast where we're running through the War for the Crown under the GM of the wonderful Crystal Fraser, who was the developer of that AP, so few people know it better, and her voices are amazing. Her NPCs are so fantastic. And we're doing that with Lauren here, who's one of our players, who plays the lovely Lily, who is a fan favorite character, and I wish to enjoy playing with again.
She's definitely one of my favorite characters.
Yep. She's so good. She's so good. As well as Ryan's Xavier.
You did it! Xavier Sever. That's the closest you've come to pronouncing it properly, Pam.
Oh, well, XS is a fantastic character, and I love playing off of them. I play Glanville. He's the most boring of the lot. And then...
Hush you. Your self-deprecation is not appreciated.
The wig situation was amazing.
That's also where you'll find what playtesting we've done is posted up there, as well as our blog network, because if you're only listening to the feed, you're only getting half the awesome stuff that No Direction puts out every single day. We have fantastic blogs written by some amazing writers, some of whom even work for Paizo or do third-party publishing or know this system inside and out. So make sure you go there and read those blogs. Like everything else on the network, it's free, but we couldn't do this without the support of our Patreon sponsors.
Our patrons.
Patrons. Patrons makes much more sense. So tell us about our patrons, Ryan.
Sure. If you go to patreon.com/no direction something. Let me just confirm that before I send them to the wrong place.
You can find the link.
No Direction.
Yeah, you can
just
find the link.
Old No Direction. It's KNOW, of course, like the Druid spell. Then you can check out our Patreon. We are working towards the Dimension Door goal, which lets us have a travel budget. So this year was fun because the entire network was at Gen Con, and both you and I were at PaizoCon, which is the first time you've gone to PaizoCon. All of this traveling comes out of our own personal pockets, and even with the Patreon, right now it is not built to support our traveling. It is just paying off our back payment of keeping the website up, and it allows us to pay for the bandwidth that allows us to expand our options and give you more shows, which we have more ideas in the hopper. So the more money that we can be raising on Patreon, the more options that we can get for you. And there's a couple of cool backer levels that I'm a little bit behind on, but I'm actually going to spend a dedicated weekend on in the near future and make sure that we are up to date on everybody's rewards.
Yep. So the rewards. Tell them about the cards.
All right. You can get your unconditioned card, which shows that you are an unconditional fan of the No Direction Network. The first one that the art is completely done for, but I need to complete the printing and the order, is mine, the enthusiast card.
It looks cool. It looks so cool.
I agree, and I'm looking forward to when we can update the banner with our art, because you and I now we each have our own art, at least outlined. I'll share the sample we have for your card, in the next update, which, you know what, I'll probably post tomorrow.
And tell them about their artist. He's done so good.
Yes, I am trying to make sure that I get his name completely right, and I'm having trouble finding our conversation in Discord. It's embarrassing, and that's why there we go. It's Chris. So it's Chris L. Kimball. He is a fantastic artist. He's been doing amazing caricatures of us, and we've been like for my card, which was the one that was going to define the style. We had a lot of back and forth that really figured out just how cartoony we want this to be, how lifelike. And now that we've got the tone set by my card, we started working on Param's card, which is just a ton of fun. And I look forward to sharing that with people tomorrow so that they can then see what we're working on. And there's a chance I send out the Ryan and Param cards at the same time, just because at this point I'm so late with the Ryan card that I might as well get the Param card out. And then we're going to have to decide internally who the next person is. I have my vote, which might surprise you, Param. So we're going to have to talk about that back, behind the scenes.
Indeed.
But yeah, so if you are a Patreon, expect an update tomorrow. If not, check out patreon.com/nodirection and see what you can do for us and what we can do for you.
And for our top tier backers, we'll be reaching out to you. But if you want to reach out to us, we need to know how our very, very top tier backers get some personal time with us. So please reach out to us. We'll be reaching out to you. Let's figure out how you want to spend that time.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
And I'm Lauren Sig.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.